So, what if I told you the blueprint for a whole new human operating system wasn't hidden in some silicon chip, but inside a simple yam? It sounds out there, I know. But today we're digging into a really fascinating framework called the physics of spiritual rendering. It actually connects the geometry you see in a vegetable to a pretty radical theory about how our reality gets built. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so it all kicks off right here with this, a cross-section of a yam. Now, at first glance, yeah, you see some natural kind of random-looking patterns, but the source material for this whole idea asks us to look a lot closer. Is this really just random biology at work, or are we looking at something deliberate, an imprint, maybe even a message that's been encoded directly into matter itself?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to decode the physical evidence first, right? The whole argument really starts by identifying a very specific kind of signature, one that's hiding in plain sight.
Now, this is where it gets really cool. Scientists looking at this would see two specific things. First, something called a Voronoi tessellation. That's just a fancy way of saying cells grow outward until they bump into their neighbors, creating this perfectly efficient grid. And second, you've got branching fractals. You've seen these everywhere, in lightning, in tree branches, in your own veins. They're these beautiful, repeating patterns that are basically nature's own architectural logic.
But here is the big pivot. The theory goes that these patterns are way more than just efficient biology. They're deliberate signature, a physical echo of some kind of higher dimensional blueprint. That little human-like figure in there? Not an accident. It's seen as a fractal reflection of a universal template. So, the big question is, how on earth could that even be possible? Well, if there's a signature, there's got to be an ink, right? So the theory moves from what the pattern is to how it gets printed. And the proposed medium is something we see every day and totally take for granted: water. And this idea is absolutely central to the whole system. Water isn't just seen as a passive substance, H2O. No. In this framework, it's described as a spiritual semiconductor. Think of it like a liquid crystalline hard drive, a living, programmable medium that can actually record and transmit frequency, or what the source calls a voice imprint. And this table just lays out the proposed pipeline perfectly. It's like a technical assembly line for reality. You start with an invisible voice imprint. That's the software. Then water acts as the liquid conductor, carrying that instruction. And what does it do? It organizes these pre-existing dimensional building blocks, which the source calls dust, into the tangible stuff we can actually see and touch. So let's see how this builds. The framework takes this idea of rendering in nature and applies it straight to human consciousness. It proposes that we're all running on one of two fundamental operating systems.
Okay, on one side you have fractured creation rendering, or FCR. This is described as our default state, It's limited, it's based in duality, and if you were to visualize it, it'd be like a matte, rigid grid. But on the other side, you've got new creation rendering, or NCR. This is a totally new, spirit-governed state, aligned with what's called the tree of life, and it's visualized as this glowing, fluid, bioluminescent light.
And get this, the jump from FCR to NCR isn't about self-improvement. It's not about patching your old software. It's way more radical. The system calls it the termination event. The old OS isn't fixed or updated. It gets completely wiped, displaced, and replaced. Just like formatting a hard drive and installing a brand new operating system from scratch. So what happens to all the old data? The old habits, the fears, the anger? Well, that's where this concept of metabolic conversion comes in. Instead of you trying to fight an old impulse, the new nature, the NCR, actually seizes the raw energy of it and, get this, converts it into fuel for the new system. So the weight of the old self literally becomes the fuel for the new fire. Now, I know this all sounds very high level and abstract, but the system then drills down into the practical, nuts and bolts mechanics of it. Like, how does a person actually interact with and govern this new frequency? And here is a fantastic, practical example. Take the common cold. We're taught to see it as a sickness, a failure of our body. But in this system, it's reframed completely. A cold is a frequency reset. It's your body actively purging what it calls acidic interference, so it can get back to a harmonic alkaline state. It's not a breakdown, it's a recalibration. So the user interface for managing all this is called toroidal governance. A torus, if you don't know, is that donut-shaped energy field you see in diagrams of atoms or galaxies, always flowing back into itself. This concept suggests that we can consciously direct the flow of that energy, the spin of our consciousness, to either bind new realities or loose old ones. So, how does it work? It's actually pretty simple. It's all about the direction of your focus. A counterclockwise spin of your attention is for losing. That's when you withdraw your inner yes from an old, limited pattern from the FCR system. A clockwise spin is for binding. That's when you tie yourself to the new, generative reality of NCR. It's basically about consciously deciding where you put your yes and where you put your no. And this brings us right back around, full circle. It connects all these seemingly separate concepts into one cohesive system that ties the spiritual right back to our physical bodies. The proposed flow of operation is this top-down cascade. It all starts with spirit, the source frequency. That signal then gets translated by the body's electrical hardware, your nervous system, which then acts as an interface to ultimately encode your physical DNA. This is the proposed mechanism for how a spiritual reality literally becomes a physiological one. Now, to really get a handle on what this system claims to be, it's super important to understand what it claims it's not. And the source material is very clear about this. This is not positive thinking. It's a living spiritual frequency architecture. It's not symbolic theology. It's a literal DNA-encoded redemption system. These distinctions are absolutely key to understanding the whole framework. And so we end up right where we started, with this huge question just hanging in the air. We've taken a journey from the geometric patterns in a humble root vegetable all the way to a full-blown spiritual operating system inside us. The ultimate claim here is that spirit can literally become physiology. And if that's true, well, what would that really mean for what it is to be human?